Let's talk mainstream coverage of recent Supreme Court decisions. And if we haven't met, hi, I'm Rachel Cohen, former corporate law firm attorney and new contributor to Legal AF over at Pragmatic Optimists with my co-host, Rhode Island State Senator Tiara Mack. There's a troubling trend that I'm noticing in headlines related to Supreme Court decisions over the past few weeks in particular, though of course it may have originated earlier, and I might just be particularly sensitive to it in this moment for reasons that I'll explain. Instead of leading with what the court actually said, journalists are covering the likely impacts of the decision, particularly in the kind of headline, short summary that most people read and may not continue reading the article. Stay with me. I know that doesn't sound particularly troubling because I'm sure that what you're curious about a lot of the time when you're reading coverage of Supreme Court cases is what are the likely impacts of the decision? The problem here is that it squishes together a 1-2 step and accelerates the speed with which the Trump administration can implement its agenda. What the Supreme Court says and what the Trump administration will do are two different things. Let me give you an example. Yesterday, the Supreme Court issued a stay in an order related to mass layoffs or reductions in force at the federal government. The decision here had to do with a lower court halting the implementation of an executive order. The Supreme Court stayed the injunction. They basically got rid of it. They said the Trump administration can go ahead and move forward with that executive order. Justice Sotomayor wrote a concurrence. Nobody else wrote. There was no opinion issued with this. It was just an order that came down from the court. And Justice Sotomayor basically said, there is a good chance that there are plans, individual plans to do with firings that will ultimately violate law. Those plans are not in front of us and we cannot decide on them. The executive order itself said that the agencies needed to put together plans to send to the president related to reductions in force. It's concepts of a plan all over again. And Justice Sotomayor said, this executive order says put together plans, make sure they're in accordance with existing law. And if they violate existing law, we'll decide that at that time. Justice Jackson wrote a dissent. And she said, obviously, the government is just going to go ahead and implement these reductions in force, whether they violate law or not. I 100% agree with her. I think she's right. On the channel, I've been talking about the use of concurrences and dissents from the right justices or the justices on the right over the entire existence of this more conservative Supreme Court. For decades, Justice Thomas, the late Justice Scalia were writing concurrences and dissents that laid out what they thought the law should be or the impacts of the law, and the current court is now citing to them. So I want to be very clear. I both agree with and appreciate Justice Jackson for authoring these dissents that make clear what the Trump administration is going to do when enabled through these decisions. But it's important that we name, when we cover things like this case, that what the court actually said was not go ahead and proceed with these layoffs. Instead, the only person who was in the majority was Justice Sotomayor, who said, we'll evaluate these plans when they individually come before us. But the New York Times ran a headline saying that the court had cleared the way for mass layoffs. Again, let me be clear. The Trump administration is absolutely going to use this decision to lay people off. But that isn't what the decision actually said. The only Supreme Court justice who claims that is what's happening wrote in dissent. And so when we have large newspapers that shape public discourse and public understanding of court cases, saying what the Trump administration is going to take away from the case as the headline, as opposed to what the case actually said, we do work for the administration and we speed up the kind of acceptance of what's happening. And we also make it seem like it's legal for Donald Trump to move forward with mass illegal layoffs. It's not. That's not what the court said. Again, I 100% believe that this Supreme Court is compromised, that it is going to just enable the Trump administration at every turn, that it is politically motivated. But they aren't admitting that yet. And so we cannot write headlines that say what the Trump administration is going to do as opposed to what the court said. Another obvious example here is mainstream coverage of the birthright citizenship case. The Supreme Court decided that case not at all on the question of birthright citizenship. They instead focused on the issuance of a universal injunction. But numerous headlines, including the Chicago Tribune, ran that said that the Supreme Court had cast doubt on birthright citizenship. That isn't correct. Again, I believe that the Trump administration will use these decisions, will weaponize them, will behave in a way that is far beyond what the court actually said. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that. But it's also important that when we summarize what the court said, we do not pretend that they cast doubt on birthright citizenship. They didn't reach the question at all. And birthright citizenship, by pretty much every legal scholar, is viewed as very good law. There's no real grounds to challenge it whatsoever. That doesn't mean that the court won't. That doesn't mean that I think that Neil Gorsuch is acting in good faith. But it matters how we talk about these things, not just for accuracy and for running the clock, but also for the people that are directly impacted when the court does ultimately decide questions like birthright citizenship and the legality of mass layoffs. The takeaway here is that it is important to read and digest these things in their entirety whenever possible. Do not allow headlines to convince you that what the Trump administration is doing is legal. And I know that there are many people that will say, what does it matter if it's legal if he's doing it? It matters to run the clock. And it matters because hopefully one day when we are once again in the majority, we can use things like Justice Jackson's dissent to point back to what the law should be when interpreted in good faith and in accordance with ideas of justice. So keep tuning in here. We'll do our best to dive into what the court has actually said over on Legal AF. You can like and subscribe and share this video. You can follow me personally on social media at Cohen.489. And you can follow my co-host, State Senator TR Mack at Mack District 6. We'll see you soon.
I'm Michael Popok, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of Midas Touch's Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now, building on what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popok Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popok Firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm organically building on my Legal AF work just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popok Firm today at 1-877-POPOK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopokfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popok Firm, fighting for your justice every step of the way.